Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And today, I wanted to talk about the origins of the conflict. I want to talk about why this is not a black and white issue. This is not necessarily right versus wrong, evil versus good. It's something much different. And the reason I wanted to bring this up today, I had a chance to watch I guess you could call it a documentary over on the pro-Ukrainian YouTube channel that is produced by Danilov. He's a Ukrainian who has since fled Ukraine and is living elsewhere, producing YouTube content. But specifically, in this live stream, they were discussing and talking about the International Legion. And there is an American fighting in this International Legion. And the American says during the course of the program he's there to uphold and defend democracy, and that if the Russians were to seize control of Ukraine, he believes it would be a direct threat to the United States by Russia threatening Western Europe, meaning he believes that after taking control of Ukraine, we could see the Russians move into Western Europe. So that in and of itself is a stretch. But I wanted to talk about the comment that American was there defending democracy. The origins of the current Ukrainian government, Zelensky, were not through the taking of power through the democratic process. I want to go real quick to Wikipedia, and I'll just read you what Wikipedia says in regards to the quote-unquote revolution of dignity that took place in February of 2014. So again, the current government in power in Ukraine did not come to power on the basis of votes. It was revolution. It was individuals taking to the street in a kinetic manner, forcing the former elected president out. So here we go. The Revolution of Dignity, also known as the Maidan Revolution or the Ukrainian Revolution, took place in Ukraine in February 2014. At the end of Euromaidan protest, when deadly clashes between protesters and state forces in the capital of Kiev culminated in the ousting of elected President Viktor Yanukovych. Let me read that again. At the end of Euromaidan protests, when deadly clashes and protesters and state forces in the capital Kiev culminated in the ousting of elected President Viktor Yanukovych. So you persons who are vehemently against, let's say, what happened during January 6th, where Trump supporters entered the Capitol. Now, obviously, they did not force another term or the continuation of Donald Trump to stay in power. It didn't happen. But what if it did? Well, that's very much like what happened or what would have happened during the Maidan Revolution in 2014. And what I'm trying to say is, if, hypothetically speaking, those January 6th protesters had forced the continuation of the Donald Trump government, again, very much like what happened during the protest, which turned into a revolution in 2014. So to say you're defending democracy as if there was a vote, as if there was a change in leadership in Ukraine that decided to gravitate towards the West, that did not happen. There was no election that brought what you see now in Ukraine to power. Obviously, there has been votes, but the problem with that is much of those persons who live in the East who do not support Zelensky, who did not support the February 2014 revolution, those folks couldn't vote. Those are the folks in Donetsk, those are the folks in Luhansk, and other places as well. So again, to say this is black and white and very arbitrary is incorrect. It's just not so. So things happen that are not often pretty. And in this case, obviously, what happened in February 2014 was not pretty. And furthermore, there was assistance from the West. Yanukovych had decided against establishing a free trade with the EU, a free trade agreement with the EU. There was money involved. It was going to involve the loss of money if Yanukovych decided upon closer trade ties with Russia. And Ukraine had already been very much established with the Russian Federation in terms of trade ties. But that's what happened. And again, by Yanukovych turning away from this so-called free trade agreement, where they would become closer to the EU, at that point, certain elements, both governmental and non-governmental elements within the EU, turned on Yanukovych and started supporting this revolutionary activity in February of 2014. So again, it's not black and white. It's not a case where in February 2014, Yanukovych was removed from power due to an election. There was no election. He was removed from power by essentially what you could call mass protest force. And that's when eastern Ukraine separated. That's when what we have basically now is a civil war. Or a civil war did start to take place. The vast majority of the people living in Crimea, of the people living in eastern Ukraine, supported Yanukovych. They did not support this revolution that gravitated towards the EU. But nonetheless, they were able to take power. That would have been probably the most opportune time for direct Russian intervention inside of Ukraine. That's when Russian paratroopers probably should have landed. But they didn't. They did not do that. Now, they did take control of Crimea because, again, most of Crimea did not want to be part of this new government in Kiev. That's a fact. And they wanted to be part of the Russian Federation. They see themselves more as Russian than they did Ukrainian. Most people in eastern Ukraine, and I believe the entirety of Ukraine, actually speak Russian. Russian is the primary language. Now, there has been some national identity creation in the last 20 years inside of Ukraine. But for the most part, it's a Russian-speaking country. That's a fact. Now, of course, in the comment section, I'm probably going to get a quite a bit of feedback on how I'm incorrect and how this created national identity in Ukraine is the one that's always been there. Well, I'm not going to debate that. But again, the idea that if Americans volunteer to fight in Ukraine, that they are defending democracy. Well, look at history. Again, what happened in February 2014 was not democracy. It was a mass kinetic protest, a very violent protest, resulting in the deaths of both Yanukovych supporters, police officers, paramilitary forces, and resulted in the deaths of protesters as well. And that's what happened. So again, to create this false narrative that the origins of the current Ukrainian government exists through democracy, it's incorrect. It's going against history. And especially you devout anti-January 6ers, it's the same thing that happened. But that's okay, right? Anyway, I just wanted to talk about that. I wanted to bring that up. I think it's important to go back and look at history. Can we say that prior to January 14th, in terms of the Yanukovych coming to power, there wasn't issues with the election process in Ukraine? Of course there were. Here in the United States, a very large percentage of the United States does not believe Joe Biden is the president. See the correlation? But in the end, Yanukovych was removed from power, and the current linear presidency, the current linear leader of Ukraine, is not there because he is from a duly elected government. Hope that makes sense. We'll continue to monitor the course of the conflict. We are continuing to watch very, very heavy fighting taking place near Bakhmut. We are continuing to watch this bloody fiasco take place. It is brutal, brutal warfare, the likes of which that have not been seen going back to World War II or even World War I in some cases. The way the fighting is being conducted. But again, there's no major status changes on the front line at this time. I would like to say that it is being reported, that what I had reported yesterday around the operations of the Russian reconnaissance and force near Volhodar, it was not supposedly the 155th Marine Brigade. It was another Russian naval infantry unit. There are multiple Russian naval infantry units operating near Volhodar, and apparently it was not the 155th. Anyway, we will have more very, very soon. Thanks for joining us today. More to come. Have a good day.